The room at Goldstone goes quiet the way a heart goes quiet before it adds a new beat. It is early.
March 1st.
The kind of morning that still belongs to night. Coffee is a second language. Screens murmur in green and white. For weeks, the operators have been bracing themselves for another wash of nonsense from a machine farther from home than any hand has ever reached. Static dressed up as data. Zeros and ones with no story to tell. A beloved relic muttering in its sleep. And then the static grows teeth.
Lines lock. Error bars shrink.
Order appears where there should be none, the way frost draws ferns on glass. Somebody sits forward without knowing they have moved. Someone else breathes out a word that counts as a prayer in rooms like this: lock. The signal does not make sense. That is the first mercy. If it had made sense, it would have been a mistake. If it had matched the models, it would have been a calibration artifact. Instead, the packet snaps into a clean arrangement that refuses every expectation. At 24 billion kilometers, in a place our maps call interstellar and our language calls out there, Voyager 1 is alive in a way we did not grant it permission to be. Clean telemetry blooms where we expected junk. A pulse rides inside the numbers.
Boom. 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 Not the jolt of a pulsar.
Not the hiss of a solar gale.
A cadence. A heartbeat.
In a region where hearts are not supposed to exist. Someone says, check with Canberra. Someone else says, Madrid too. Minutes stretch into little infinities.
Redundant paths. Cross-checks.
The signal returns the way moonlight returns to a lake. The three stations agree.
The pattern is real. It is repeatable. It follows us.
It changes after every command we send, as if the space between us and the machine has learned how to pay attention. Engineers, who speak skepticism like a native tongue, stare at the screens and feel something private crack.
In the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the atmosphere tilts.
People stop saying glitch and age and telemetry corruption. They start cautiously to say non-natural and interacting. They lower their voices the way people lower their voices in museums and hospitals. A boundary has been brushed.
Maybe crossed.
The ship that left in 1977 with analog gyroscopes, 607 kilobytes of memory, and the optimism of a species that still baked its logic into brass and tape, has wandered into a neighborhood we wrote into equations but never expected to navigate. If this were only romance, the science would shrug and call it a day. But romance does not produce the same signature on 3 continents. It does not create pulses that lock to our commands and then drift when we go quiet. It does not punch the speed of light in the ribs and laugh. It does not nudge a trajectory in a region of space where gravity is too polite to move a paperclip. And it does not draw a spiral out of magnetism like a calligrapher with a steady hand and a taste for symmetry. The weeks that follow are built from repetition and doubt. The pattern stays. It is not a software artifact. They have ripped and rebuilt the pipelines 3 times. It is not a thermal quirk. The old probe's body temperatures hum inside expected bands. It is not the sun. Voyager crossed the heliopause in 2012 and left that weather behind. It is not a cosmic ray event. The signatures are wrong. It is not a known radio source. Triangulation says the origin rides with the probe. The more boring explanations you kill, the louder the idea becomes that you have run out of boring explanations. Months earlier, November brought small anomalies like gnats that would not leave the room. Magnetic noise spikes that refused the old rhythm. A half-dozen responses that showed up a hair late, nanoseconds stretched like gum. A handful of attitude control adjustments that looked like the ship had been tenderly pushed by fingers made of nothing. Not collisions. Not radiation pressure. Not the old faithfuls. Invisible forces, if force is even the right word. There is a phrase that starts in hallways and drifts into meeting rooms. A phrase that knows better than to put on a badge. Transition zone. Space with texture. Space with pockets. Space that stops behaving like the ocean on a windless day and starts behaving like a field of grass with paths pressed into it by feet you cannot see. Pavel Krovtsev arrives in the conversation like a well-aimed pebble. Cosmological topology is his beat. Breakthrough listen is on his CV. In a journal that does not normally smile on poetry, he writes, "We can no longer claim that the interstellar medium is uniform. There are pockets, regions where time and matter behave as if modular, as if the universe has textures we are only touching now with fingertips." The quote spreads like a rumor in a town that needed a better story. If space is not uniform, then distance is not simple, then time is not a single clean thread. Then our assumptions have been blindfolds we were too proud to remove. Imagine someone showing you a map that you have used all your life and tilting it until a hidden ridge catches the light. Now imagine that the ridge is not land but law. That is the mood in Pasadena. That is the mood in Tokyo and Darmstadt as the Max Planck folks click through plots with eyebrows that won't come back down. That is the mood on late-night calls that slip between laughter and dread. If the speed of light changes in certain rooms of the universe, even a little, what else do we need to relearn? GPS works because time behaves. Banking works because time behaves. Planes land because time behaves. Now a small, elderly machine is telling us in a patient tone that behaves is a provincial word. Akira Nakamura, out of Tokyo, offers an image for the public that the public does not yet deserve. Voyager, he says, is a seismograph pressed against the veil of what is. The tremors it records do not belong to earthquakes. They belong to a deeper structure shifting. If you are inclined toward panic, you panic. If you are inclined toward awe, you sit down without deciding to sit. The argument is old in one sense and newborn in another. The pale blue dot taught us how small we look from a long way off. That was a lesson in humility. This is a lesson in ignorance. You can be small and correct. You can be small and wrong. Today's data leans on the second sentence. The agents of doubt are not philosophers. They are graphs. They are delays where there should be no delays. They are harmonics where there should be noise. They are spirals stitched into magnetism that keep time with no known clock. Spiral. The word lands with more weight than the letters can carry. The team at NASA with partners at Kyoto flips Voyager's magnetic data through several transforms like a chef turning a batter in a bowl. Windowing. Cross-correlation. Logarithmic scaling. Three-dimensional mapping. What returns is a geometry that should not be there, not a swirl of chaos, but a steady architecture, turns at measured intervals, angles repeating as if cut with a compass. 26 hours and 37 minutes between repeats. Not Jupiter's day. Not Saturn's. Not a pulsar's heartbeat. Not instrument aliasing. They try to break it. It does not break. A call goes out for other eyes. Arecibo has been quiet since its body fell to Earth, but remote analysis remains a thing it can do like an old singer with breath left. They search for background sources that could be guilty. They find none. The pattern belongs to the space the probe occupies, not to a lamp across the street. Then Javier Montalban, who looks at data as if it is prone to hide from him, notices something that looked like nothing until he pointed. The spiral is not smooth. It ripples in an inner rhythm. Not a chant, not a drumline, something like a sequence shaved and looped. Fibonacci, but truncated. A progression that starts, runs until a cliff, jumps back, and starts again. Time after time, with an error margin under 0.1%. A harmonic loop code, he calls it privately, in a message he will not send until he edits it 3 times and gives up making it sound less mystical. Words like dark and mirror show up, because scientists are people and people are poets when they get cornered. Dark photons. Dark electromagnetism. A mirror sector where the rules share bones with ours but wear different skin. The theorists, emboldened and embarrassed, bring out their cleanest math and their oldest dreams. Caltech pushes models of scalar fields through the throats of supercomputers until the fans make a sound that is not unlike prayer. Scalar waves that do not propagate like light. They oscillate the vacuum itself. Not traveling through space, changing space. The models produce patterns that flirt with what Voyager is seeing, like old lovers at a station platform who know better than to run toward each other, but do it anyway. If this is right, then the probe is not crossing a cloud. It is sweeping a groove. Not atmosphere. Geometry. The universal vinyl analogy starts as a joke on a whiteboard and refuses to die. Picture the cosmos as a record. Picture Voyager's line as a needle. Picture the bumps and ridges as a code we did not put there but can read if we slow down and stop pretending we are deaf. Push the analogy too far and it breaks. Keep it where it belongs and it keeps writing itself. Every time Earth phones home, the record answers. Not with words. With a change in the music. The amplitude shifts. The curve shape tilts. The phase slides. The change has a delay consistent with attention. Ban the word message from memos. Call it a field response. The difference is cosmetic. The meaning is not. Something about the configuration of space around the probe is adapting to our presence. You do not have to paint intent on it to bow your head. Then comes the thing that makes engineers swear without sound. Internal sensors disagree. Not noisy disagree. Consistently disagree. Attitude sensors give coordinates that cannot be reconciled with each other and cannot be explained away by bad parts. Primary instruments and backups, separate power rails, independent clocks. They sing different songs and both stay in tune.
More than one position. More than one space.
Lapse of position vector, someone writes, trying to name the hole in the floor as the floor tilts. You can pull smart names into the room to feel less alone. Lisa Randall has written about brains. Brian Greene has written about hidden dimensions. Nima Arkanihamed has drawn pictures in the air with his hands that make graduate students happy to be alive. Those ideas were safe when they were slides. They were elegant when they were chalk. It is a different climate to see them in telemetry. Functional dimensional superposition. The phrase looks ridiculous until it is the only sentence left that does not lie. The future has a habit of visiting early, and then leaving a note taped to your door.
I stopped by. You weren't ready.
In 2004, a Physical Review Letters paper refused to declare the Pioneer anomaly closed even as polite consensus steered it toward heat. In 1995, the Compton Gamma Ray Observatory logged bursts out of nowhere, and then the paperwork pushed them into a drawer labeled unclear. In 2007, Vela glitched in a way that did not fit the catalog. A handful of astronomers called it non-stationary interference and were told to enjoy their weekend. Perhaps those were not ghosts. Perhaps they were corners of the same cloth Voyager is pulling now, threads that only make a pattern when you stand far enough back and squint. Between January and May, the light lag between us and the probe breathes in a way it should not breathe.
Not clock drift. Not ionosphere.
The lag stretches and squeezes as if the medium has tides, as if an undersea channel changed depth while a submarine passed. Loop quantum gravity. People smile in a way that is not triumph but recognition. Rovalee and Ushteker have been telling anyone polite enough to sit through the math that spacetime might be granular.
A net that flexes.
A lattice that rearranges. What would it feel like to fly a needle over a place where the weaving tightens?
It would feel like this. It would look like this. Signals would bend.
Coordinates would conflict. Time would stutter and then pick up the beat as if nothing happened. And then, on a day that will get a paragraph in a textbook in a decade or it will vanish into myth, the universe pulls a small trick that is not small.
A command is sent.
The log knows when it left. A reply appears before the command has fully departed the dish. 3 ground stations, 3 clocks, 3 confirmations.
Not human error. Not an off by one.
It is not convenience to call it an inversion. It is not romance to call it a shortcut. If you are kind, you say geodesic in a geometry we have not learned yet. If you are tired, you say time blinked. Standing in that blink is the drama we have been trained to avoid. Popularizers will say time is an illusion and sell t-shirts. That is not useful. The useful thing is to admit that what we treat as universal is sometimes local. That the M of metric in your equations may get a new friend. That the part of reality we use to calibrate reality can move. The temptation when you own a microphone is to draw a line from this to everything.
To medicine.
To markets.
To minds. Resist the messy parts.
Still, allow the gentle parts.
Yes, GPS leaks time.
Yes, farmers like seasons that keep their appointments. Yes, finance loves a clock that behaves. Our way of life is a romance with constants. A little tremor in a cosmic hall should not make us burn our calendars. It should make us widen our models. There is, beneath the technical noise, a quieter question that does not ask your permission.
What counts as a sign?
We are trained to look for carved stone and taut ropes. We are less trained to smell order in a field and know that humans were here. Voyager is not seeing stone or rope. It is seeing a pattern that answers.
Is that intent?
The ears of a civilized science flinch.
So they should.
If you are going to entertain purpose, you owe the room restraint. One can be careful and brave at once. John T. Reyes, gray hair cut to the quick and hands that remember the exact feel of a panel he sealed in a different century, gave an interview in a voice like paper. He did not expect the craft to be working at 80. He did not expect to be alive to hear it either. When asked about the latest numbers, he said, "It is as if the probe is being managed by a protocol that is not ours." Protocol implies an author. The word lands like a pebble on the calm surface of a lake and throws rings to the far shore. The split is elegant in its simplicity. Do we keep touching the membrane, or do we step back and close our hand?
A faction says, stop. Lights off. No Provokation.
Another says, more.
Extra Pinks. Different Modulation. Push. Ask.
There is a third path, less cinematic, harder to sell.
Neither retreat nor charge. Learn the grammar.
Engage without shouting. Assume your own ignorance is the loudest thing in the room. As if to reward humility, the pattern unfolds another layer. A Japanese team converts a phase modulation in the spiral into sound. The graph sings at 43 Hz. That frequency means nothing to the sky. It means little to the earth beyond the fact that human bodies have been arranging sound into patterns for as long as lungs have been teaching air to mean. You could call that a coincidence. You would not be wrong. Coincidences have their own beauty. Stack enough of them and language reaches for other words. A symptom, says one of the quieter voices.
Not proof. A symptom. So meeting to bring to the doctor without howling.
New math arrives as a gift or a dare. Functional dimensional variability. It is a mouthful that sounds like someone trying to get away with whimsy at a blackboard. And yet you have a craft that thinks it is in two places, and instruments that refuse to confess to a fault, and a signal that ends before it begins. The phrase stops being cute. It becomes a handrail in a room that just dimmed. This is the part of the film where the frame would widen to include us. We avoid that for dignity as long as we can. Then we stop avoiding it. If space has rooms, perhaps Earth has closets. Places where compasses argue with themselves. Places where the air trembles without cause. The old catalogue of odd atmospheric flashes and magnetic knots and animals sprinting in the wrong direction the day before the ground moved under them. Before, you filed that under folklore or emergent weather. Today, some of it files under small geometry. It is cheaper to mock than to measure.
Measurement is patient. Mockery is fast. Let's pay for patience.
Build the experiments. Instrument the odd places. Ask for the pattern to repeat. Do not bend the data to fit the fear. Somewhere below a mountain, a detector sleeps. It wakes when a whisper tickles it. Somewhere in Pasadena, a room fills with meetings. Somewhere in Madrid, someone writes a script that will run and fail and then finally not fail, and they will stand up and stretch and remember they have a body. The work continues not because it is glorious, but because it is meticulous. Because the friend you trust is the one who does not lie when your story gets good. Imagine the simpler picture. The spiral is a trick. The timing is as they say, coincidence. The position conflict is an aged bird twitching its wings. It is a better world if that is true.
It is a safer story.
You can tuck your children into it. But if the sky is more structured than we thought, if the dark carries its own architecture that only shows up when a machine built by hands wanders through with the right kind of ignorance, then the story is not worse.
It is fuller. It is harder.
It is more beautiful. The best stories do not apologize for how much they ask of you. This one asks you to be two people at once. A skeptic who demands a measurement that would make your grandmother proud. A wanderer who refuses to flinch when the measurement points past your comfort. Let the details keep you honest. Voyager's memory was a toy by modern standards. Its gyros taste like a museum. Its power source is a slow candle. It does not have a brain. It has instruments and a spine of protocol that has been patched by engineers who are now ghosts and by engineers who bring their grandchildren to the visitor center. It was meant to see Jupiter and Saturn.
It went on.
It slipped the heliopause like a kid slipping a fence. It entered a map we were still drawing. What it found is the part you tell in a low voice because it might be wrong, and that is not a sin. The day the time inverted, a person in the control room chose not to speak first. There is a wisdom in silence that looks like fear. They let the logs argue with themselves. Then they asked for the raw timestamps. They resynced clocks that were already synced. They ran old tests, the ones you run when you have run out of ideas.
They asked Canberra.
They asked Madrid. The answers came back unchanged.
The world did not end.
The world adjusted a notch you can feel in your teeth if you are paying attention. Media does what media does.
It wants an Alien. It wants a face in the dark. It wants a God.
The people with hands on the knobs and eyes on the noise want none of that.
They want a table. They want a pencil.
They want a formula that says when a spiral will appear and when it will not. They want to be wrong in a way that lets them be right next time. You want to know what happens if NASA or ESA stands at a podium and says, "Time is not as universal as we told you." Here is what happens. Your life will look the same tomorrow.
Coffee will still help.
Not because the announcement was empty, but because reality is richer than our schedules and kinder than our fear. The implications will move through labs and then through industries and then through classrooms and then through policy and then, if we are wise, through how we treat each other.
It will take years.
The sky is patient even when we are not. The more intimate implication is the one that will not leave you alone after you turn off the video. If there are membranes between versions of space, if there are textures and rooms, if there are places where observation is not passive, then what else should we rethink? Not in the sense that thoughts create cancer or cash. In the sense that attention is a physical act. In the sense that how we look is part of what there is. You do not have to swear an oath to metaphysics to behave like your gaze matters.
Put your palm on a table. Feel the table. There is wood.
There is varnish. There is a humming you cannot name, courtesy of the grid and the city and your own nerves. You accept that most of this experience is not in the atoms. It is in the relations. The grain to your skin.
The friction.
The memory that says this is like your grandmother's kitchen or nothing like it. Now climb 2 floors up to where Voyager is touching the dark. The table is geometry.
The palm is a field.
The friction is an exchange without photons. The memory is everything. Skepticism saves us from sleep. It is a friend who keeps your car keys when you are drunk on beauty. It deserves a seat at the table. It sits there now, tapping a pencil, asking, what would falsify this?
Good question.
The answer is a model that predicts the spiral period as a function of variables we can change. The answer is a signal that refuses to answer when we ask it a question we designed to make it answer. The answer is a third instrument seeing the same ghost at the same time in a different way. The answer is 9 months of boredom followed by a sentence that does not make headlines because it makes sense. The yearning deserves a seat too. It is the part of you that revered the golden record because it was a love letter to anyone there was to love. The irony we cannot resist is this: we may have mailed that record to reality itself. Not to aliens, not to a civilization beyond stars, but to the medium that carries stars. If space has ears, we have serenaded it without meaning to. If the medium has a habit of restructuring when it is sung to, we have sung to it with more power and more humility than we realized.
What does 43 Hertz want? It wants nothing.
It is a number with a context that humans made. We made it through drum skins and cathedrals and studies that ask if brains like certain pulses. The sky does not care. The sky is too busy being. And yet here it is, a standing wave in our analysis, a little coincidence that does not win the argument but refuses to leave the room.
So you keep going. You test the test equipment.
You send a new sequence that carries no information to see what information the field will invent.
You let time pass.
You let the cadence find you again. You name nothing you do not have to name. You claim nothing you cannot defend. You plan for a day when the old power source dims past safety. You plan for a day when you will have to say goodbye to a friend who took you to a border and showed you that border is not a line but a band. Elsewhere, a person not trained in math watches the video on a phone in a kitchen where dishes soak. They do not know what a brain is. They know what a boundary is. They have been living against one for years. The story tells them we are smaller than we thought. It tells them we are wrong about things we thought we could count on. It tells them that when you press a hand against a wall and the wall presses back, you are part of the experiment. They dry their hands and stare at the window where the night keeps its own counsel. They feel a fragile and durable thing at once, included. The craft itself says nothing. It obeys and refuses in equal measure. It listens when commanded. It answers when it likes. It drifts in a nowhere that is a new kind of somewhere. Its sensors bicker, then agree, then disagree again. It is dignified in a way that we do not associate with machines, and we should. It was built by people whose names are footnotes now, and people whose names are not on any plaque. It lays down one more corridor of human feeling in a place where feeling is not supposed to reach. An internal report from JPL will one day leak or it will not. It will say, in a tone you could call dry or brave, that the anomalies are reproducible, that the instruments are healthy, that the environment is the variable. It will refuse to say intelligence. It will refuse to say life.
It will refuse to say alive.
Those words will be left to those who sell ad space. The report will choose something like structured response. It will be right to be stingy. If we force a face onto the field, we learn nothing. If we grant the field the courtesy of its own mystery, we might earn a new equation.
Picture a chalkboard.
On it, the cosmological principle sits like an old king, large-scale homogeneity and isotropy. The shy student in the back raises a hand. Sir, says the student, what about local structure in the fundamental behavior? What about rooms where the rules twitch? The king looks down and tries to smile. We are remodeling the palace.
The walls stay. The furniture moves.
The new rooms have better light.
This is not a threat.
It is a gift that looks like a threat. The world asks you to be better at seeing. It asks you to give up comfort in exchange for contact. It asks you to stop demanding that reality be a single theater with good sightlines.
It might be a multiplex.
It might be a house with mirrors not to show you your face, but to show you the corners. All stories about the sky are stories about us. Not because the sky cares.
Because we do.
The way we look at something changes us. The way we look at ourselves changes what we build. What would you build if you learned to love the unknown as a neighbor, not a burglar? What would you teach your children if you could put in their pockets a sentence like, most of what is real is not obvious, and most of what is obvious is not the whole? What law would you write if you believed that stability is earned, not given, that constancy is a habit, not a commandment?
You cannot live on metaphors. You have to eat. You have to sleep.
You have to show up at a job that pays you in money, and then one day they give you a cake. You are allowed to let the story of Voyager be a small song in your day instead of a manifesto. But if you are hungry for more, if something in you stood up when the spiral appeared on that screen, then carry this the way sailors carry the weather in their bones, as a reminder that maps get better when we admit where they are wrong. None of us knows how this ends. It might end with a correction, a speech, a paragraph that says, "Thank you for your patience. We were fooled by a well-behaved nothing." It might end with a footnote in a textbook that says, "The first measured field response to a human-made transmission occurred in the early 2020s and led to a decade of experiments that gave us a vocabulary we did not have and a humility we badly needed." It might not end at all. It might be a door we open and then discover there are more doors. Tonight, at Goldstone, an operator will slide a cup a few inches without looking.
A console will glow. The code will flow.
Out there, the probe will be where it is and where it isn't. A lattice will tighten, then loosen, and when it tightens, the time will stretch, and when it loosens, time will spring back. The spiral will sketch itself and erase itself and draw itself again as if the dark had a hand and loved to trace. You are not required to be calm. You are not required to be certain. You are invited to be present. To not send the next command until you have listened. To let the heartbeat at the edge of the map remind you that you, too, are a pattern that learned to answer when called. To treat the unknown not as a cliff but as a field. To treat the field not as an enemy but as a teacher. Imagine the old technician John, closing his eyes in a chair that has seen too many nights. He thinks of the golden record. He thinks of a team in 1977 arguing about which song belongs on a message to the possible. He thinks of a protocol that is not ours. He thinks of what it means to be found.
His lips move.
You might think he is praying.
He might be counting.
He might be saying the same words you are.
We don't know yet.
And then softer, with a smile you cannot see, good.
A last image. A field of black. In it, a line. On the line, a dot. On the dot, an instrument.
Around the instrument, a spiral that repeats like a promise. Between the dot and the people who watch it, light that sometimes hurries and sometimes dawdles.
It's a People's box, a city. Inside the city, a kitchen.
In the kitchen, a person with their hand on a table, learning how to feel.
The lesson is slow.
The lesson is generous. The lesson is this: most of reality does not glow.
It shapes.
Most of what shapes you does not speak. It answers.
Ask better.
Listen longer.
Be careful. Be brave.
And when the space between you and the thing you love changes its mind, change yours.